we will get started, and we will start with our roll call. So, Denise, please call roll.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Present.
Maureen Nichols?
Here.
Patrick McPherson?
Here.
Glenn Flint?
Here.
Lily Larson?
Present.
Molly O'Halloran?
Present.
John Witzel?
Here.
Commissioner Bloomstead?
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/stateboard. Board members, please remember to engage your microphones before speaking and to turn them off when you are finished, and please turn off personal cell phones. Thank you. We move on to item 2, which is the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the October 6, 7, 2016 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussions or questions? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran?
Yes.
Lily Larson?
Yes.
Glenn Flint?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Cell phone's now off. Okay.
I
Next,
turned it on. I turned it on when you said you turned it off, apparently.
one of those days. We'll move on to item 3, approval of agenda. Commissioner, are there any recommended changes for today's agenda?
We did have one request. Are you all right, Glenn? So
I'm okay. I got the information.
Yeah, so we have that cleared, nothing to take off of consent. And then we are going to do our strategic planning presentation carryover from yesterday.
Yes, and I think we'll carry that over in conjunction with item 9 and do that right before we go into the ESSA discussion. So we'll put the strategic planning in, carry it over at that point. Does that sound reasonable? All right, is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any questions or comments? Discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Yes.
Lily Larson?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, next we will move into our public comment period. Thanks to the members of public who are in attendance today. We have a request, a special request that has been granted for 10 minutes. Henry Burke has requested to comment for 10 minutes, so we will start there. Mr. Burke, good morning.
Good morning.
You have 10 minutes.
My name is Henry Burke. Can Nebraska education officials claim bragging rights over scores on the national tests? This presentation will answer the question. The major national tests are the NAEP, N-A-E-P, the ACT, the SAT, and the PSAT. First, let's look at the NAEP tests. The NAEP tests are administered in grades 4, 8, and 12. Typically, NAEP uses a much smaller sample than the ACT tests. For the 2015 NAEP science test in Nebraska, 4,700 students participated in the grades 4 and 8 NAEP science exams. With a Nebraska student enrollment of 301,000, the 4,700 students represent less than 2% of the students in the state. Participation is much higher in the ACT tests. For the 2016 ACT exams, 18,600 Nebraska students participated in the national tests. With 88% of Nebraska high school graduates being tested by the ACT, the results are quite representative of the total student population. Because the NAEP and the SAT tests are aligned with the Common Core standards, Nebraska should avoid these exams. This basically leaves the ACT exams. Even though the ACT test is partially aligned to the Common Core standards, the ACT test is a better choice than the SAT among the college entrance exams. A recent decision by the State Board of Education is important. 2 proposals were evaluated, one from ACT and one from the College Board, the SAT. Among other considerations, ACT came in slightly cheaper than the SAT. I hope that the lower cost was not the deciding factor in your decision. At the September State Board meeting, the board voted to select ACT as the college entrance exam. In March of this year, it was announced that there is a new alternative to the ACT and SAT college entrance exams. It is called the Vector Assessment of Readiness for College, known as Vector ARC. Under development for 4 years, the Vector ARC writers did their homework to create a first-class assessment tool. Vector ARC explains that every student should receive a fair opportunity at college acceptance, even those who are not using Common Core. Beta testing of Vector ARC is underway, and educators need to monitor carefully the progress of Vector ARC. Because Vector ARC test is not aligned with the Common Core standards, the non-Common Core states, like Nebraska, should seriously consider the Vector ARC test. Education expert Donna Garner wrote an insightful article on standardized testing. Mrs. Garner explained that there are 2 types of standardized tests: criterion referenced tests and norm referenced tests. Criterion referenced tests compare how a student performs against a standard. In Texas, the curriculum standards are called the TEKS, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. By law, the elected members of the Texas State Board of Education are responsible to adopt the curriculum standards. Students in Texas take the STAR end of course tests, which are criterion referenced tests. In Nebraska, NISA and soon ACT will provide the tests. Even though the Common Core assessments are also criterion referenced exams, test writers can design questions that are subjectively scored and generic. The SAT and NAEP are norm referenced tests. These tests compare individual students' results with the way students across the U.S. perform. For example, above average, below average, or just average. Since norm reference tests are designed to rank students nationally, generally on the bell curve, these tests should not be used to assess whether students have met certain curriculum standards. To test for that, a state should use criterion referenced tests developed in close alignment with the curriculum standards. With Nebraska adopting the ACT test, this information is important. When Nebraska is compared with the ACT is technically a criterion reference test because the ACT compares how a student performs compared to a set of ACT college readiness standards. The ACT has established college readiness benchmarks for each subject area: English, reading, math, and science. Even though the ACT is technically a criterion reference test, the ACT does provide students with individual scores that tell them how their performance compares with the national and state norms. In this sense, ACT resembles a norm reference test. The State Board of Education and Nebraska Department of Education must decide which type of test best fits the students of Nebraska. How are Nebraska students doing on the national ACT tests? The answer is not very well. The average ACT Nebraska science score was 21.9 in 2012 and 21.5 in 2016, a slight drop over the 5-year period. When Nebraska is compared with the other states on the 2016 ACT science test, Nebraska is ranked near the middle of the pack at the number 24 position. Minority students, blacks and Hispanics, do more poorly on the national test than whites. This is not a discriminatory view, it is simply a statement of fact. Because race affects test results, the minority makeup should be examined. Nebraska has 71% whites, 4% black, African American students, and 12% Hispanic or Latino students. Nebraska's minority composition is roughly half the percentage of the nation as a whole, 16% in Nebraska versus 29% for the nation. The achievement gap, or the difference in test scores between whites and minorities, is rather troubling. In Nebraska, the white-black achievement gap in the average science score is 4.9, and the white-Hispanic achievement gap is 3.7. As a percentage of the white scores, these gaps are huge. For the average science score in Nebraska, the white-black achievement gap is 22%, and the white-Hispanic achievement gap is 17%. Obviously, Nebraska needs to work hard to raise the ACT scores for blacks and Hispanics. Better Nebraska standards are clearly needed. Well, what about the NAEP scores? For grade 8 science, Nebraska was ranked number 12 with an average scale score of 160. In terms of achievement levels, 75% of Nebraska students performed at or above the NAEP basic level for grade 8 science, and 41% were at or above the NAEP proficient level. In conclusion, because the NAEP, SAT, and PSAT tests are aligned with the Common Core standards, Nebraska should avoid these tests. Nebraska should continue using the ACT test, even though it has many Common Core elements. A new alternative to the ACT and SAT tests is the Vector ARC exam. Because the Vector ARC test is not aligned with the Common Core standards, non-Common Core states like Nebraska should seriously consider the Vector ARC test. According to the 2016 ACT test, only 40% of Nebraska students are ready for college science. This ranked Nebraska at the number 24 position. The achievement gaps in Nebraska are quite troubling. In Nebraska, the white-black achievement gap in science is 22%, and the white-Hispanic gap is 17%. The State Board of Education, Nebraska Department of Education, and all Nebraska educators should be very concerned about these huge achievement gaps between whites and minorities. If the State Board of Education is serious about improving educational outcomes for Nebraska students, it must adopt strong education standards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. We'll now move into our regular public comment period. I have, I think, 3 people who've signed in for the public comment period, so we will start with the first person, and you'll be given 5 minutes. First person is Kayla Zabrowski. Did I get that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Hello, Mrs. Zabrowski, and you will have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I have packets for each of you, so you can follow along if you'd like. But I'm Kayla Zabrowski with the American Diabetes Association of Nebraska and Western Iowa. And I'm here to talk about Diabetes Busters. But first, our mission is to prevent and cure diabetes and to improve the lives of all people affected by diabetes. Right now, 1 in 11 people in America have diabetes. In Nebraska, it's 11%, so we're a little above the average. And diabetes kills more Americans than breast cancer and AIDS combined every year. And it has increased the diagnosis rate 350% over the last 30 years. And there are 20,000 type 1 people diagnosed every year. Those are children diagnosed with diabetes every year. And 5,000 type 2 now. So we're seeing more type 2 diabetes in children. And that's a problem because the medications are geared towards adults, and so their bodies can't process it correctly. And it is a problem for, and I should go back and say that type 1 diabetes is where insulin is not produced. Type 2 is where it is not absorbed correctly or does not create enough insulin. And then there's gestational diabetes where it's people who are pregnant have diabetes. And so type 2 diabetes is roughly 90% of people with diabetes. And so there are measures you can take to prevent it, and including diet and exercise. And so that's why we have created this program, Diabetes Busters, with the University of Iowa and the Iowa City Public School District. And it is a program for 4th grade students. Right now it's free because we have gotten sponsors to help cover the costs. And it is led by ADA, so the American Diabetes Association, and volunteers. And we go into 4th grade classrooms. It only takes an hour, and we teach them about diabetes and nutrition and exercise. And so we start with a pre-test, and they just get a basic knowledge of their diabetes knowledge, and that is in your packet as well. And then we break them into 3 groups, and they rotate between sessions of the diabetes education and nutrition and exercise. And in the Diabetes 101, in 4th grade terms, we teach them about type 1 and type 2 diabetes and try to dispel any myths 4th graders might have. And then in the nutrition section, it's interactive, and we teach them about reading labels, what foods are good, what foods are bad, what are some good snacks they can have at home. And then in the exercise one, we equate food intake to exercise output and make it fun, and break them into 2 different relay teams. And I go through food flashcards, which I put an example in your packet. And they, so like if they have a Big Mac or a quarter pounder with cheese, they'd have to run 6 cones and run 10 jumping jacks. And if they had a celery stick flashcard, then they'd run 0 cones, since there's 0 calories and 0 fat. And then they choose what snack they want at the end, what they think is the healthiest. And so then they come back, and then we give them a goodie bag, and the goodie bag has a pedometer, which we encourage the teachers to use in their PE classes or in the regular class. Make it a competition, keep track of their steps. They have a Stop Diabetes bracelet right here. And so every time that they reach for a snack, hopefully they will remember to choose a healthy snack instead of a unhealthy one. They get a risk test and a letter for their parents explaining the program, and then hopefully the whole family will take the risk test. And then they get a plate, and these are donated by Hy-Vee, but it kind of helps break up the food groups and make the portions more reasonable. And so we sent out letters to all of the principals in Lincoln and Omaha, but we only got 10 schools interested. And so we're trying to get into the schools, and so I'm asking for your help to either write a letter on our behalf, or even consider putting it into the health science curriculum. And if you have any questions, I put my contact information in the packet, and I also put, I'm the kind of the boots on the ground in Nebraska, and then we also have our moderator who is in Des Moines, and she oversees Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And so thank you for your time today, and please let me know if you have questions.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman? You're giving me that look. I don't want to ask a question, but is a comment out of order?
Go ahead, Ms. McPherson.
You know, I really have a concern about this issue. I had 2 brothers pass away because of this issue. And I served on the American Diabetes local board, national board for a number of years. And when you're looking at this issue, it's an issue that really has a profound effect on young people. A lot of us think this is type 2 is something we get when we get older and fat and don't exercise. But there is so much more development of type 2 with young people, young students, and it favors, if you can use that word, minorities. So when you get to that point, you've also got a learning issue. You know, these people are dealing, you know, whether it's whether they're pre-diabetic at that age or they're becoming type 2, you got a real issue there. And I'd encourage the commissioner to, if he could, to send a letter in support of this, and I would encourage the staff to look at this issue as they incorporate standards in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move on to public comment by Deb Andrews. Good morning, Mrs. Andrews.
Good morning.
You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Deb Andrews, 1235 A Street here in Lincoln. According to the National Assessment for Educational Progress scores, just 1/3 of Nebraska students are proficient at reading. Illiterate people cannot govern themselves. In the information age, reading is essential for life and to keep the republic. The brain architecture for reading is on the left side. Phonemes, distinct units of sound, have been tracked back to Africa. The brain has learned languages through phonemes. The neurological pathways necessary for language learning are present at birth. Evolution. In Rudolf Flesch's books of 1955 and 1981, Why Johnny Can't Read and Why Johnny Still Can't Read, Flesch explained phonics and only phonics must be taught first. It is how the brain has evolved over 50,000 years. The child must first be taught letters, the sounds they make, and the rules for pronunciation. In 2009, Stanislaus Dehaene book Reading in the Brain confirms Flesch's hypothesis. It provides the details of how the brain learns to read. There's a video online of Dehaene's lecture, and you can just listen to it if you don't have time to read the book. The brain needs to focus on individual letters in order to build the neural codes in the language center of the brain, the left hemisphere. Unfortunately, when the child is taught to focus on the whole word or the shape of the word, it misorients the child's attention to the wrong side, the right hemisphere of the brain. The National Council on Teacher Quality has reported for years that teacher preparation is not aligned with the reading research. That means certified teachers don't know how to teach reading. Which brings us to this homework from Lincoln Public Schools that you have in front of you. This is Lincoln Public School. It was given to me by a parent of a first grader in early October. Things good readers do to read words. Number 1, look at the whole word. Take apart the word. Look for small words that you know in the word. Reread the sentence. Read to the end of the sentence. Say blank when you come to the new word. Reread it and try to say the new word using meaning clues to help you. Use resources. Look around the room or in another book. On the back are suggestions for parents to help your reader. Go back and try it again. Check the picture. Reread to check. Does it make sense? Would I say it that way? Does your guess match the letters? Think what makes sense that starts and ends with those letters. Read ahead of the tough spot and then go back. That is not how you learn how to read. That is not how you teach reading. It is not how the brain learns to read. As I've suggested, the research has been out for decades. We know what works. We're not doing it. We pledge allegiance to the flag. We need readers to govern this country. The definition of treason is the crime of betraying one's own country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Next, we have Kristen, and I'm not sure I'm going to get, it's Joe? Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen Job. I work at Westside Community Schools, secondary education, and I'm also a representative of the Nebraska Association for the Gifted. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on behalf of retaining the State High Ability Learner Director at the Nebraska Department of Education. I would like to take my time to discuss the varied rationales for why this director is a pertinent and necessary player in the state of gifted education in Nebraska. The HAL director wears many hats in this large and diverse state. In many of our smaller, more rural school districts, there is not a single teacher or administrator who is responsible for establishing an identification model for the district, carrying out the identification of gifted students, providing services for said gifted students, teacher training in gifted education, and then the follow-up reporting to the state regarding all of the above. The state HAL director can assist these smaller rural districts in all of those aspects, as well as best practice in providing essential gifted services, including acceleration plans, social emotional development of gifted children, and underachievement issues in giftedness. The HAL director helps to guide and shape these districts in creating the most beneficial plan for their gifted service program. In larger, more urban districts, the state HAL director is essential in working with the gifted personnel to streamline the reporting of the many services they offer in their districts. They also help with identification plans, teacher training, and offering a clearinghouse of services and opportunities throughout the state that gifted kids can participate in. At this very moment, the National Association of the Gifted is meeting in Tampa at their national meeting, in which all state directors take part in multi-full-day meetings to assess the state of gifted in the United States. Nebraska has always had a voice in this discussion, has always voiced concerns for the smaller rural districts in information sharing and best practice in gifted education. We will fall further and further behind as a state if we no longer have a HAL director attending and learning at these meetings. The Nebraska Association for the Gifted has advocated with the NDE as recently as September for an interim person to fill this position until a statewide search can be done. We as an advocacy organization are very concerned that the needs and rights of gifted students will not be met if this position is eliminated. Gifted students in the state of Nebraska need a voice at the state level, or we will continue the brain drain that afflicts this great state. Gifted students have special needs, much like special education students. We would not dream of eliminating services for these students, and we must have the same level of concern when it comes to our best and brightest as well. A given day in my position runs the gamut from identifying new students to the district, creating acceleration plans K-12 for students in either a content area or an entire grade level. I work with teachers every single day in all content areas to develop differentiation plans for specific students. I work one-on-one with the smartest kids in the district on language arts because their teacher doesn't and won't differentiate for them, and they must be differentiated for. I advocate to administration for various academic contest fees, classes at the UNL Independent Study High School, because a 7th grade Spanish student doesn't want to travel to the high school and take classes with juniors. I work on engineering competitions, cutting PVC pipe, and a million other random things. My day is not much different from any other in my position or in a general education class. But we need a clearinghouse for resources in the state so that if I don't know about UNL Independent Study High School, I have a single person at the state level I can ask the right questions to. I need a person at NDE to advocate for my students and the 46,000 other identified gifted students in Nebraska. A statement is needed that Nebraska cares for all learners and provides for all students. Let's look to the future with innovation and change in this position and make it known that highly able students are of great value to this state. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all of the public comment that I have at this time, so we will take a short break, 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you. And we have one more public comment period. Ms. Janelle Jack was a little delayed with parking, and since we've not transitioned on to another item, we will allow Mrs. Jack to have
you.
her 5-minute opportunity
Hello,
for
thank you so
comments.
much for
Thanks.
being considerate. I really, really appreciate it. I live in Eustis, Nebraska, which some of you may not know. It's the sausage capital of Nebraska, but we have to worry about cows. We don't have to worry about, oh, you can't park here because it says no parking. So I thoroughly apologize for being tardy. I am lucky enough to be the Gifted Education Coordinator for ESU 11 in Holdridge, Nebraska. ESU 11 serves 13 different schools in south central Nebraska, ranging from Cambridge to Franklin, up to Minden, and then back to Eustis Farnham. In those schools, we have 653 identified high ability students. In those schools, we have one gifted coordinator. And that's me. We have coordinators that work with the kids, who have the best of the kids at heart, who want to give them the best that they can give them, but aren't able to do that because most of them, it seems, tend to be the title teachers as well as the gifted teachers. To us, the gifted students are the future for Nebraska. And if we eliminate the position of the gifted contact at the state level, we won't have that person to fight for these kids. And these kids need that person. These kids need that person to stand up for them, to say, no, she does not need to sit through another day of math that she already understands. Encourage her, challenge her, move her on. Teachers are doing the best they can, but they don't know what these gifted kiddos need. And because of that, that's why we need this gifted person at the state level. When you talk about what we do, we run over 25 quiz bowls to try to encourage the thinking and the brains in these kids. We do something called Invention Convention, where we have 159 students in grades 3 through 6 that participate in Minden. And then we also do something really awesome called Summer Honors. And Summer Honors is a program that's the reason why I think we have the position of mine at the service unit in Holdridge. And what we do is we invite 8th through 12th grade students to apply for Summer Honors. Last year we had 443 students apply. 115 students were chosen. The money that these schools get from the High Ability Grant comes to the service unit. But altogether last year, the High Ability Grant brought in $59,000, and that was all. That doesn't pay for my wage, that doesn't pay for Summer Honors or anything. In Summer Honors, we get instructors from Norway, West Virginia, California, Chicago, all over that come and work for 2 weeks with these kiddos and push them farther than they've ever been pushed before. Take them to things and do art and do drama that is beyond their imagination. And it's so awesome to see how far they soar in those 2 weeks. Without the state head of gifted education, we won't have that person to allow for these funds. When, like I said, we won't have the person to be able to push for gifted education and to stand up and to be the advocate that these kids so highly need. Do any of you have any questions for me about my program or anything else? And I apologize for the tears too.
Thank you, Mrs. Jack, for coming today. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to our agenda to item 7, action items. So first, under action items are those items under Teaching and Learning Domain Committee. I will turn it over to Maureen. Are there any motions?
Yes, Madam President. We have 5 different motions to take action on by the board today, and I'm going to turn each of those over to Glenn Flint because they're in his area.
All right.
Well, thank you, Maureen. I'd like to make a motion that we grant the commissioner the authority to contract with Cougar Inc. for the continuation of providing Nebraska career connections to Nebraska school districts.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to grant the commissioner the authority to amend the contract with the Magnate Group LLC.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
8 yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Nebraska Communication and Information Systems Content Area Standards.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
8 yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Nebraska Education and Training Content Area Standards.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'm just going to clarify, that is item E.
I'm out of
and
order.
That's all
yes.
right, and we will come back then to item D.
Yeah.
I got confused
So
there.
just for clarification, that
My
motion
bifocals on.
was approve the Nebraska Education Training Content Area, item E. So just clarification.
Sorry about
Any other discussion? Denise, please call the roll on item E. Yes.
No, you were on the right one. I was on the wrong.
That's okay. Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
Now I would like to make a motion to approve the Nebraska Human Sciences, Family and Consumer Sciences Content Area Standards.
Second.
So we have an emotion and a second, and that is item D. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Rachel Wise,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right.
Made it.
Thank you, Maureen and Glenn. Moving on to item 2, Student Success and Access Domain Committee. Molly, are there any action items?
Yes, on 7.2A, I would like to move to grant the Commissioner the authority to approve a contract with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to develop and deliver nutrition service trainings and technical assistance to all Nebraska.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
7.2B, I'd like to move to adopt the proposed revisions to Rule 51, items 010.01 D14, 92 NAC 51, regulations and standards for special education programs.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, now are we on D or C?
C.
Glenn's game.
You're on C.
C, okay. Please, I ask, I move to authorize the commissioner to contract to conduct nutrition services, administrative reviews of local education associations as required by the National School Lunch Program.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes. Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
8 yes.
I'd like to move to 7.2D, and I'm going to hand this over to Pat Tim because it is in transitions.
I would move to grant the commissioner the authority to approve an amendment to contract, I don't have my glasses on, with Janice Lee, a pyramid coach for early childhood.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions?
Being honest.
Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right. Moving on to item 3, Budget and Finance Committee. I will turn it over to John Witzel.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I move to approve revised 2017 to 18 and 2018 to 19 budget modifications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I know as we get started on this, we discussed at length yesterday. This is not something we'd like to do by any means, but this is unfortunately a challenging situation that we're in. Any other comments, discussion? Pat?
I think we also need to mention that this is something that we're required to do by law, and it doesn't mean that we're going to have to cut these things. It means that we need to be prepared to cut these things if the Appropriations Committee does not have the money.
Glenn? And then
You know, I just offer up that if we do find people to fill those vacancies, especially this gifted coordinator, we ought to look at other areas. And I'm just offering up the NASB membership. I know we'd get a lot of good out of that, but I'm not sure that we get as much good as we would out of a coordinator for gifted kids in Nebraska. So that was my 2
And that
cents.
certainly can be a suggestion for the Budget Committee to take a look at, Budget and Finance Committee to take a look at. Lily and then Molly.
I'm still relying upon the arrangement that I understand that we have. Services will still be done and provided and supported, and in view of the fact that there are the national meetings, and we could still have at least somebody in attendance and on top of that as well. So I realize that we're doubling up the work that folks are having to do in the department, and it's the way it is. But as Molly asked yesterday, we could have a turnaround in the economy too, folks. And that's what, if we do, then that will help us out with some of these issues. So, got my fingers crossed.
Molly?
Commissioner Bloomstead, I want you to know that we as a board trust your management skills, and this is a time when things are tough, we have to pull together. But I also would reaffirm what Pat Tim just said. This is not a definite commitment to cut these services should it be 8%. So I would just ask you, as you continue with the strategic plan and working AQuest, that we prioritize every student every day. And I think we've all heard loud and clear that we do have not only gifted students, but we have those twice exceptional that cross between special ed and talented and gifted. So just as one member, I trust that as you are under pressure that you try to not just double up people's obligations, but really think maybe how we can streamline gifted education in an innovative new way with your systemic changes.
Yes, I just, these are difficult choices, and as I mentioned yesterday, it seems that we've been making these kind of choices for a long time, much longer than I've been here, obviously.
Yes.
And I think with the coming approval of a strategic plan that gives us better direction, I would reiterate my thought process that I think it might be time for a comprehensive organizational review conducted by an outside source, if we can find a way to do that. We found a way to do a strategic plan. Maybe time to do that, to make sure that what our structure and organization is in line with our strategic plan and is, challenging our people in the most comprehensive sort of way to and most efficient way to work. So I'm going to continue to push on that thought. So thank you.
I will make one final comment on this as well. I think it's important that we also realize that there were several elements that we weren't happy about in this difficult decision to make. And it certainly included the position for the HAL director, but it also included the multicultural coordinating position, just as critical and essential today in a different perspective, but again, important for us to consider. We took away important career and technical education services with the Microsoft Academy is another piece that's there that's at risk of being lost. And so again, another very important service that meets the needs of kids across the state and is a support for teachers as well. And then as well, we are taking at risk vocational rehabilitation and a federal match in the items that we had to put forward. So again, I do appreciate the leadership of John Witzel chairing that committee and the committee that spent time looking at this and having this discussion before this recommendation came forward to the full board. So again, thank you, John, for your leadership and for the work on the committee. If there's no other questions, then Denise, please call the roll.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes, and just as a point, since I failed to respond on the comments, I just want to say that there's an opportunity for everybody in this room and in the state to make our case with the governor and with the legislature. And, that's where a lot of work needs to be done, folks. We're trying to respond to the law, so I'm sorry. My vote was yes.
That's a long vote, okay.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Lily Larson,
Yes, and
John-
thank you, John, for your service
you.
on this committee.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right. I do not believe we pulled out an item on the consent agenda, did we? Okay, then I'm just going to move to item 8. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none, Denise, please call the roll.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, thank you. Next, we are going to move back to item 6, executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Madam Chairman, I move that the State Board go into executive session to receive advice from legal counsel regarding the Commissioner's contract and evaluation process, and for the protection of the public interest.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
I have to do the, yes, I'm sorry, I about forgot. The State Board of Education will now go into executive session to receive advice from legal counsel regarding the Commissioner's contract and evaluation process and for the protection of the public interest.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make the motion, please, for this board to come out of executive session.
So we have a motion and a second. Any comments or discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes. Sorry, I was reading on to the
Maureen
next.
Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, so we're now out of executive session from which we received advice from legal counsel regarding the commissioner's contract evaluation process, which we will discuss at a later time. Moving on, we are in item 9, and our first item we're gonna do is the strategic planning committee report. And we've got 2 steps in this process. The first is to go through a little bit of background information as to where we are, and then spend some time going through the report. And then we have some homework assignments that we'll talk about. I want to start by thanking the board committee again, Pat Tim, Pat McPherson, and Lily Larson, for the time and energy and work they have spent on this over the past couple of months, through this last process of really establishing goals as a part of the strategic plan process. And then I'd really like to thank and send out our great gratitude and appreciation for the NDE internal planning team that has spent a great deal of time on this process as well. And that's Carol Baum, Matt Hastings, Atwell, Makusha, Russ Masco, Lindy Foley, and Donlin Rice. So thanks, and certainly the commissioner. And thanks again for all that you have done. We'll start by Donlin is going to give us a little bit of kind of overview, background,
Okay.
where we've been and where we are to today.
All
So
right.
Donlin?
Thanks. And if Drew, if you want to pull that up. Basically, we've been on a journey for about a year. We started last September with a planning retreat. We released RFPs in October. In December, we brought in our 4 finalists, and you awarded the contract in January. So FSG was able to begin the work right away. They basically had a 4-phase process, and you were all involved in many of these meetings and interviews and all of that kind of thing. So we had a lot of stakeholder engagement, took a look at external assessments, where things are around the country, things like that. They started drafting the plan, and then phase 4, which we are still working on, is finalizing the plan and the implementation plan, even though we are finished with the FSG work. So again, you've seen this slide before, lots of input from several sources, both internal and external, interviews, surveys, and a really cool thing where we had the key stakeholders come in twice from lots of leaders from around the state come in and give us input. So this just shows it kind of on a calendar version, but started the work in February with phase 1, and we are still on basically phase 4, and that's where kind of FSG in September handed the ball over to us, and we are continuing, you are continuing, as well as the staff. So since that time, we've had several, as President Wise was saying, many internal meetings. We've been revising the narrative, which you will get a look at this morning, a lot of data analysis along the way. This is just a little graphic that kind of shows how we build the plan. It's very multifaceted, multi-layered, where you and the board at the policy level will then kind of hand it over to us at the department to finish out the process. But we have our strategic priorities with our mission and guiding principles, then our goals and outcomes. Those are all policy level decisions, which you will be approving, and then turning that over to the agency, to the commissioner, and saying, we need an implementation plan. How are we going to get these things done? And so another way to look at that is you kind of see how this flows. We've got the vision, mission vision, which really are the core values. And then you have our 2 strategic priorities, which we did release a couple of months ago. We also have been patterning the plan around our AQuest tenets. So for each tenet, you will see we have an outcome, a goal. And then from those goals, that's really where the agency takes over with objectives and strategies and activities. And then how are we going to measure all this? And eventually, we want to evaluate it on a long-term, ongoing basis so we make sure we're on track. Because remember, it is a plan for 10 years. So, I think it's my cue to turn this over to President Wise, and I will hand out the narrative.
So what we're gonna do is walk through the document that we've been working on, and we're gonna walk through this in kind of 2 steps also. No, it's not. Now it is, thank you. We're gonna walk through this in 2 steps, look through it, talk about it, and then also at the same time, we as a strategic planning committee are recommending that we present this draft, which is an initial draft, at the NASB meeting, that this be our presentation. So as I go through this, I'm gonna make suggestions about the presentation. And as opposed to in the past, our NASB format has been small groups kind of talking with constituents in your area around topics, will be a full panel reporting out on the strategic plan.
This is in 2 weeks, right?
Yes.
So study hard.
And you got homework, so you have to study, prepare, homework, and I'll share that as I go through the document. So the first, if you look at page 2, the first page is an introduction, and one of the first things you're gonna see is the term NEQuest. Part of the discussion at the strategic planning level has been, what do we call it? Strategic plan. But we also keep talking about AQuest. And we felt it was important to differentiate between AQuest and the strategic plan, and we landed on NEQuest. Because many of the elements of our strategic plan align well with AQuest. So the first introduction defines a little bit and labels our strategic plan NEQuest. So for us moving forward, that's what we would be referring to our strategic plan as NEQuest, and our plan for schools for accountability is AQuest. And that's defined on that first page. The next 2 pages, page 3 and page 4, this again is a lot of the work that came from the stakeholder group, from SFG, FSG, and it really helps to clarify the roles and the strategic direction. And both of these 2 pages, as you look at these pages, help to define where we need to go as an agency and the roles and responsibilities that both the board and the agency have moving forward to impact education across the state, but also the strategic direction. And in that particular chart on page 4, you'll see that it really describes where we're moving from and where we're going to, and how this is really a foundation for a transformational process for how the organization operates. And I think one of the things that, as Matt, as the commissioner, has presented over time about organizational changes, you really see how the changes are starting to happen in the organization that align with this particular strategic direction. Okay, the next page is moving forward. And as we start to look at our moving forward, there's a couple elements that I really want to pull out from this. And one is the operational approach. And that operational approach is really defining what I would say are 3 levels of accountability that make up what we're looking at for this strategic plan. One level is the NDE accountability, and as you see, it's defined, and that's our process work, our regulatory work, the interagency collaboration, our data systems, being fiscally responsible, all of those elements that are very much process pieces and regulatory pieces. The next is a service level of accountability. And some of this came out of some of the voc rehab discussion as well. That there are a variety of services that we provide as an agency, and we need to look that we're being accountable to the services that we provide and meeting the needs of our customers, so to speak. So there'll be goals as we move forward around that service accountability element. And then the other piece that we've probably spent more time on, and you'll see that in our goal development, and that's our district and school accountability. And that's how are we moving the needle in Nebraska when it relates to student achievement. And you'll see some of those goals are defined. The next section describes the strategic goals. And the last section of this is a piece that if we had more time, Pat McPherson would speak to, but he will too at NASB. So this is part of Matt's presentation, or Pat's presentation. He and I will do introduction and a little bit about some of the next steps, and in particular the importance of monitoring and evaluating in an ongoing process as a part of the strategic plan. Did I catch that, Pat,
Yes.
correctly? Okay. Including an external evaluation at some critical benchmarks in the process. The next page is really your summary page that I would envision. This is a page you'll pull out and use quite a bit when you're sharing and talking about NEQuest with various constituent groups, because this is our mission, our guiding principles, the strategic priority, and then our outcomes. And you'll see our outcomes are divided around our tenets, our 2 domains and our tenets. Those are really critical pieces as we move forward. We have presented before. This is where we want your input on the entire document, which will be your homework. But these are some of the elements we need you to really be thinking about. As we move forward to page 8.
Can I ask a question, if you will?
Yes.
If we have a tenant that we're accountable for, will we be responsible for maybe a presentation or?
You bet, and I'm coming right to that.
Sorry.
Nope. On page 8, it's Molly. So Molly needs to pay very close attention to page 8 for a couple of reasons. This is our positive partnership and relationship tenet. So we need to ensure that the language of the tenant outcome embraces the direction of that tenant from not just a school perspective, but from our organizational perspective. And then at this point, we have 3 goals. You'll notice that the first goal is about the dropout rate. And this you have as an example to show you where this has come from. The staff has done an amazing job in looking at what data sets are available. What can we use? Because we also don't want to create a burden in starting to create and collect data that we maybe don't have unless we determine it's really a priority and important goal. So this particular example is the dropout rate information. And so the committee made recommendations based on data. So when you see a percentage in a goal, it's because of the information that was shared by us. Matt Hastings and his team were instrumental in spending time to really pull the data so that as we tried to establish goals, we have some goals that are realistic and based on data. So this is an example.
The green line represents where we are today. So you will see they have 5 back years worth of data. So the green line represents current on that graph.
Green line there, gray line here.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay,
On the
my
printed
eyes are
copy.
not good here.
Gray line on the printed copy. So again, this is for your
My green line.
reference. As you look at, we wanted you to see and understand how these goals were put together, the discussion that occurred, and the background data that was used. So right now there are 3 goals, and I'm not going to read all the goals again because we are, I think, still pushed on time. 11:15? Okay, we just got 15 minutes. Phew.
Which agenda item are we on?
We
Is
are
this
on
attached?
item 9.
Item 9?
And under item 9, this is probably not attached.
Okay.
This is the carryover strategic plan from yesterday. They will be attached and you will get electronic copies. So you'll see that right at the moment there are 3 goals. The work that's still being developed, and when I talk about homework in a few minutes, includes the development of some additional goals. These are our school and district accountability goals. The agency is still working on the agency accountability and service goals. So one of the examples of a goal that I think will show up, Molly, in your area is going to be a goal that Voc Rehab is working on around the service satisfaction goal. So over the next week, you'll be getting some information of some additional goals. Here's where we're pushed in a time crunch. We really would like to be able to vote on this in December and adopt our strategic plan in December. And so this next month, you're going to have some homework to do to see if we all feel comfortable with where we land in December. If not, we've even entertained the possibility of holding a special meeting yet in December so we get this done. So we have homework assignments that are due and due by December. So these are example of the goals under student success or positive partnerships and access. John, the next page, number 9 is yours. Molly, at NASB, you will present at the same time when you present, and you'll have about 3 minutes because of the length of time to talk about any of the elements on this strategic plan or related to your tenant at NASB. John, so you would have page 9. If you look at page 9, one of the examples is graduation rate. This I'm going to point out, if you notice in the goals, we're looking at goals that get to understanding and looking at disaggregated data around our subgroups. That's a critical part of what we do. If we don't look at how we're closing the achievement gap, then we are missing a very important role and responsibility that we have. So you'll notice this particular goal, because we already are at a fairly high rate, I think it was 89.9% of graduation. You'll see that 92% is what we're putting for graduation rate, but you'll also see another caveat in that goal, and that's no one subgroup under 85%. So we have in this particular goal an example of 2 measures that we'll be looking at and following that are critical and important to this process. So again, these are examples of the goals. John and then Glenn.
Regards, I haven't been involved with, if you will, the strat planning committee, if you will. But what I'd like to say is, am I limited to these goals? Can I go ahead and start stacking goals that I feel appropriate for transition?
Yes and no. Yes, you can work with the commissioner and Don Lynn if there's some language and goals in the next 30 days that you think are critical and essential that we vote on. However, the other yes is over time, this is a living document. We will be making revisions. We also don't want to put so many goals that it's unrealistic.
And you're, okay, that
So
was my next question
if,
with regards to the EBAs. Are these
right,
correlated with the EBAs?
absolutely. In fact, goal 2.2 was based, I believe, on one of the EBAs.
I thought so.
So as you notice, you will see some goals that were tied to EBAs as we go through. The data sources that were used for the school-related goals were EBAs and raw classification or data sets that we had in the department.
So, clarification, I'll live with what I got right here for right now.
There may be an agency or voc rehab service related or agency service. Each of these probably will have 1 or 2 more goals added in the next week.
Okay.
These right now are the district goals, and for NASB, that's really what they're probably going to be more interested in. And so I think we're at a good point to present our initial draft without additional goals for NASB.
Okay. Because we've been frustrated sometimes, we would like to add more EBAs to A-Quest regards to transition, but we're limited. So,
But those are the work in process.
thank you.
So absolutely a work in process.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn?
So on this sheet, goal 1.1 is the dropout rate will be less than 1%. Wouldn't that make the graduation rate 99%?
No. Dropout and graduation rate are two very
Different.
different
If I don't graduate,
measures.
what do I do?
I may take longer.
Oh.
I may still be there longer. So just because I didn't drop out doesn't mean I graduate in this process.
And I was just thinking, like, we might have to define that just a little bit more, like our 4-year cohort graduation rate, so that would make that different.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a second question. Do we have any data on the amount of remediation our graduates need? Because it seems like we want to eliminate that or reduce that.
I think there's a lot of areas, I mean, this is what's taken us a long time also, is we've got to make this manageable first. I think there's several areas that will be important that we think about as we move on. As you look at each of these areas, there are some areas that when you look at assessment and achievement that come into place. So let's walk through the rest of this, and then for each area, you'll still have opportunity to think, provide some input, and we can always modify and change as we move forward. So the next page, Pat Tim, Educational Opportunities and Access. Example of the goal here is students will have earned a dual credit or successfully completed AP coursework is one of the examples. And then the expanded learning opportunities is another example of the goals that's there. Pat's been on the committee, so I'm gonna kind of keep going on from here.
Before we leave, could I ask you?
Yes.
Okay, on 3.1, I would just add something to indicate industry certification.
You'll see that later. Okay, let me get to that later, okay? You're gonna see another goal. That's why we wanna get through this, look at the big picture.
Okay.
And then come back, okay? And you'll have opportunity to add
Okay.
later. College, career, and civic ready. Glenn, this would be your area for NASB and going forward, so we need you to pay close attention to this. This is an EBA goal. 4.1 is an EBA goal from some of the questions that were asked around the EBA. And then this goal kind of gets to Molly, your point. The 4.2 goal really gets to how do we answer the question, are students college, career, and civic ready? And that's a part of the answer to the question by using a data that looks at completion from post-high school programs and certificates. So take a look at that as we move forward. Lily would be assessment, and we have two goals under assessment. One of the goals, the first goal, is important to understand we are just implementing ACT. So there are some goals, such as goal 5.1, that puts off creating the baseline data, and really this goal will be revised and established once we've gone through a year of implementation of ACT. So this is an example with a transition of assessment that we really can't establish a goal till we've established our parameters of what our cut scores will be, what our reporting processes will be, and what we believe is the baseline data for us to use and the progress that we want to make around the ACT as a part of one of the measures. This basically is a holding spot to say ACT will be an important measure, but we have to delay the defining a little bit clearly of the metrics around that particular goal. 5.2 gets to our NISA. If there's changes in assessment, then we may have to look at how they change and impact the goal. But at this point in time, we do have historical data, we have some current data, and so using NISA as our point right at this point in time.
And on 5.2, are we using a supergroup, or are we actually going to disaggregate?
We are disaggregating by subgroups. So again, subgroups are an important part, not just for ESSA, but for us to understand and to understand in how we then look at, are we closing achievement gaps and making a difference there? Yes.
Again, I'm still hung up on the dropout rate, I guess, but if 99% of them are not dropping out, then does that mean 9% of them will not be proficient in reading, math, and
There's not
science?
necessarily a correlation
Okay.
between dropout and achievement.
Okay.
You can have gifted kids that drop out. You can have kids who are on target and doing, so there's certain things that don't correlate well from my perspective, and that would be an example of another group that doesn't correlate well.
And
They're
Glenn, if you
different
look at our
metrics.
chart, right now, the dropout rates for all is like 1.3, is that correct? 1.2, 1.3, so it's pretty close. It's the little green diamond.
I see that,
Do you see
yes.
that? So it's pretty close. One's not
Right.
unsurmountable.
So, on page 13, we move to our next tenet, and that's educator effectiveness. Maureen, if you'll take a good look at this area right now. Again, we only have one goal at this moment in time in this area. We had a lot of discussion of some other goal areas that may come forward with some additional data and some additional work from the department. But again, this might be an area that we have to look at over time. What are some additional goals that we want to focus on as it relates to educator effectiveness? Really quick, we have just a few minutes, and we were hoping to have another presentation today. We may or may not. Committee. Lily, Pat, please. Did I miss something?
Well, I think something that we need to maybe say again is that, right now, we know that there are going to be many more goals as we go along. But we also have to have the data to back up those goals. And that's going to come in time on some of the things that we may want as a goal. Do we have data to support it now, or do we need to collect data in order to support it so that it can become a goal? And so I want everybody to remember that as we move forward with this. And I've said this in every meeting I've been in, and I'm gonna continue to say it. This is a working document. This lives and breathes, and we will be constantly evaluating it. That's one of the reasons we ask for a new standing committee, so that this isn't laid aside, that this will constantly be looked at. This is going to be how we live. And so think about that, because I know everybody in their tenant has, well, how come we're not talking about this? How come we're not talking about that? Well, we will. It just may not be in this next month. You know, we've got to collect the information to base it on evidence. So, does that make sense? Okay.
Any other comments from the committee? If not, what I just handed out to you are important board dates. This is your homework assignment. This is your homework assignment. By November 11th, any comments on the initial draft are due to NDE, to Don Lynn and the commissioner. If you want to CC me, that would be fine. And that's when you read the entire document. If there are specific comments that you have to make on, or suggested revisions, those are due by November 11th.
A week from today.
The comments that are going to be reviewed will get back to the Strategic Planning Committee by the 14th. The Strategic Planning Committee will meet again on the 16th, and we will consider any revisions. We'll review the additional goals that are being developed and put together the next draft of this document. We will use the initial draft as is for NASB unless we find some minor kinds of changes, but it won't change much between now and the NASB conference. After November 16th, the revised back by the 18th will get back to the full board. You will have 10 days. As I look at that time frame, okay.
Thanksgiving is in there.
I know, I was
Apologize
thinking we were
for
gonna
that,
get it
so.
before Thanksgiving so we could get it out. We need to get it out. We're gonna revise that date.
Okay,
We need to go before Thanksgiving.
well, they will have, the full board will have it on the
22nd.
18th, and they will have back.
So it's a short period of time, but we need to get, what we wanna get to you is several days before the December board meeting that you've had a chance to review this document so that we can adopt this document if possible. In this process, so let's change that to November 22nd. That you'll get it November, on the 18th, turnaround time by the 22nd back in. We'll try to have it to you by Tuesday, the end of Tuesday before the board meeting. So you've had a little bit of time to really look at the final document. The intent will be to spend time at the work session on the final document, determining if we're comfortable with the living, breathing document, and can adopt that document in the December board meeting. If you find that there are things you're really not comfortable with, you've got to let Don Lynn, the commissioner, and myself know, so that the Strategic Planning Committee can discuss that on the 16th. If there are things that you feel very strongly that you don't see us being able to pull this together, or you're not comfortable with, we as a committee need to know that by the 16th. Because the other thing we will be looking at is potentially adding a special date, an additional meeting in December to adopt the strategic plan. If we feel that we need to spend additional time to pull this together so that it really represents everyone's view and input.
For clarification.
Okay,
the
Lily and then
date,
Pat.
The date, November the 18th now becomes November 22.
No, November 28 becomes November 22.
We might be able to get it out to the full board after the 17th too, which will give you an extra day,
Yeah.
so.
We'll work through that.
What
Glenn.
date do we present this to NASB?
That would be on November 17th, and we'll send out, I'll have Laura send out the exact time of our session. I can't
I think it's
remember, I didn't look
1:30.
at it.
It's after lunch.
And I will send out a little more direction around that presentation before the 17th. And so you'll all have an understanding of what your role is on that presentation for the 17th.
Rachel, may I say
Pat,
something quickly as soon as
okay,
Pat's
just a
done?
second. I had Lily, then Pat, I don't remember, did I have you? I know I have the other Pat, and then Donlin, I'll get to you just a second. Pat?
Oh, me, okay.
Yes.
I presume you were gonna say this, but the reason we really wanna get this done in December, is, one, we've been working at it for a year. Secondly, we don't wanna put this off until January when we're talking about new board members who haven't had the opportunity to go through this process. And for that reason, we think it's really important that we come to, we come to the point where we approve this document in December. So everybody that's here has had lots of exposure and opportunity, and we go forward with what this board has accomplished and done. So that's the reason, and that's the reason if we have to have a special meeting, we'll have to do that.
Thank you, Pat, and I just want to piggyback on those comments as well, in that we also don't have committee meetings. We reorganize in January, so in essence, January is a month we probably would not be taking action, and so that delays it even further down the road. And so I think our committee feels strongly that we do not want to delay this any longer. We know we can make revisions, we know we can make additions as needed over time. Donlin?
Drew, could you put up this graphic, please? I think to remind you too, if you think of the multi-layers in this plan, when you're, as tenant chairs, you probably have some goals, or we like to think of more as strategies or activities that might belong to a specific team. What you're gonna be voting on are those very broad, overarching outcomes and goals that you can have. Melody's team can have other activities underneath. I mean, all of that will happen in your tenant committees and your domain committees, so you'll have lots of opportunities. So as you're thinking about your comments, just think to myself, is this an overarching goal that I want that can meet several different teams, or is it an activity that maybe belongs in one team? And that's just kind of to help you think that through as you look at how the pieces fall throughout. Because you'll certainly have input on the implementation plans as well, but that's our work at the agency to bring that to you through domain meetings, or, we want your input, but, that's where kind of we will reach those very broad outcomes and goals.
Any other questions at this time? John?
This is a very simplistic question, but I've got to ask it. If this is approved very, very soon, are we already collecting metrics on a lot of these goals?
Yeah, yes. Actually, that's why our goals, our first wave of goals, were tied to what kind of metrics do we have,
Okay,
and what's
thank you.
realistic. Because we need to think more strategically over time if there are areas that we don't have the metrics for.
Okay.
So we didn't want to add goals at this time that maybe are not
I see.
realistic at this moment to collect, but we may be adding those over time. Pat?
Thank you, Donlin. I think that was important to share that information, and if you're sitting here and you're thinking, Glenn and I are thinking, well, maybe we ought to do something about kids that are have dyslexia or teaching phonics, or you're talking about maybe my issues on diabetes education. Some of those will fall right into those lower levels, and what the staff decides. Hey, we've got a subgroup economically disadvantaged, for instance, where we have to have a specific strategy to address these issues in order to raise the graduation rate and slow the dropout rate. So a lot of that's going to be staff doing these things is in a
Sorry, I
more
took a-
micro manner than, yeah, and that's how we're gonna evaluate what the commissioner gets done and what, in the long time. It's up to him to make sure that the staff has got those goals and is recognizing those opportunities, so.
All right, if there's no other questions, I apologize, we're not gonna have time today for ESSA. So I know that really, really breaks the heart of some of our folks today that are in the audience.
We will get you an update, though, on that progress, because they do have some good materials to share with you.
Thank you, Donlene, also. Item 10 is board reports, dates, and discussion items. There's, again, in your file, you've got the requests for meetings that are coming up. Is there a motion to approve the meeting participation?
So
I'll make-
moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, Denise, please call the roll. I'm sorry, 10.1.
I did.
Pat and John second.
Could I interject something here?
Yes, discussion if it's on this motion.
It is actually on meeting participation. So I think we've got a date of November 18th, 2 o'clock, Reconnect Success. We're going to go down there on a field trip after the NASB meeting.
All right.
So-
All of us invited,
Yes. I don't know that that's
and you'll
on
get
the-
an email to us, right?
Yes, yes.
Thanks for
Thank
putting
you,
out.
Glenn.
Yeah.
All right. Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, item 2, you do have the monthly expense report again in your materials. Item 11 is your information items and written reports. We'll move on to item 12, a work session, which is adjournment. A work session will be held on Thursday, December 1st at 2 p.m. and a board meeting will be held on Friday, December 2nd at 9 a.m. in this room. We are having a teaching and learning domain committee meeting at now 11:25. So if we can adjourn to that committee meeting. And thank you, everyone. I know this was a lot of information today, so thank you.